Peace, y'all. It is I, Energy Master Allah, aka the EMA, and you are watching 5% Nation, the Solar Return. This is episode 12, and it is the fourth and final part of the Lost Found Muslim Lesson 2, aka the 1 to 40, aka the meat. We have the meats. So we dealing with degrees 31 through 40, and you see my subtitle here, How to Defeat the Devil. So these lessons came together in a formal capacity back in 1964 as a result of what was taught by 1934, so a 30-year window right there. Incidentally, 30 is also the gematria for the letter Lam, which means to teach, learn, or flames. So we burning shit up with this knowledge that we given here. And this right here is a masterclass in both geopolitics and spirituality. Two things that seem like they're on the exact opposite sides of the spectrum with regards to the material and practical, and the spiritual and prophetical. And so some reconciliation has to be made between the two. And my favorite quote by author Arthur C. Clarke, he said, any type of and I'm paraphrasing here, any type of technology that is sufficiently advanced will appear as magic to a primitive culture. So if you are uncivilized and you don't truly understand these lessons, it just becomes dogma and doctrine. Whereas what has been revealed to me through closer analysis of the math contained in here over the years, this is literally the formula to correct the state that the world has come in. And mind you, I get this in waves, like a global update whenever I have these revelations. And so my biggest challenge tends to be figuring out how to explain it to you, having not, installed the software first. Like if you don't have the math background in it, then, under your belt already, it's hard to break down the terminology in a way that is short and sweet. And so that's why I do these big, long lecture series, because I understand what I had to go through. I understand what academics have to go through in order to get to the level of proficiency that they are with the stuff that they know, like what did they have to build on top of in order to be able to understand it so easily. Like, as long as they're talking to colleagues, the technology is simple because they know the jargon and shorthand and all of that stuff. And so there is a communication barrier, a translation barrier that is installed here that prevents you from being able to use these lessons for mass destruction until you've, the secret is not being unlocked for you until you have reached a state of discipline that would even get you to that point in the first place. And so a lot of the problems that you're seeing in the world right now, I'll demonstrate how they are the result of receiving knowledge too early. That's what every one of those scriptures is about. The whole Garden of Eden story, or you hear the story about the Watchers and all that. It's all about handing our creation information they weren't ready for before they had full wisdom and experience to understand what this power is to be used for. From what I can tell, all of this does become prophetic in several ways, given the window. So we had the world wars occur in 1914. So the first one starts in 1914. These lessons are transmitted by Fard Muhammad to Elijah Muhammad between 1931 to 1934. And then we have the outbreak of World War II not long after this, and then and this ultimately ends. Sorry if I'm mixing these dates up, either 45 or 47. So 1940. I'm trying to remember when the actual, it should have been around 47 because 48 is when Israel was started. But in that video, case in point, these lessons were transmitted before the dropping of the atomic bomb, is what I'm saying. And so, given how many times and ways I've been able to associate some of the information in these lessons with the atomic bomb, and the fact that I know that somebody else was well aware of this information, given what happened with the UFO situation and the way that new age stuff took off. Man, let me tell you, like the fact that that whole 23 scientists plus one thing ended up as 24 extraterrestrial species in the channeling sessions that Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, attended back in the 70s, and then were published in the book Only Planet of Choice in the 80s. It seems that somebody was tapping into the same stuff, but it became something externalized instead of internalized. You know, there was some projection going on, and this idea of maintaining peace through fear and nuclear weapon supremacy. And then, unfortunately, just like Eisenhower warned, the military industrial complex gets a hold of this, and now you have private companies who came into a situation between government contracts and just all this money being thrown around to where they're able to take advantage of the compartmentalization of the military in order to be able to operate in secret and develop technologies that are claimed to be extraterrestrial or at least interdimensional in nature, but made by us, and be able to create false flag situations. So you're able to put on the appearance of there being something, that's not from here doing this, and be able to make it seem like this country or that country is involved, and just be able to put on a theatrical performance in order to have some guided chaos on the planet, if you will, because unfortunately the way that things operate, if you don't have, like, the only thing that's keeping us in physical existence, as I demonstrate from these lessons, is that there has to be a sort of dynamic tension that is essentially what you would expect when trying to maintain a liquid state. That's a good visual to apply to that. Whereas if everything was solid, it'd be just ice. Everything would be frozen. Everything would be still, and it would be dead. If everything was gas, it would be too chaotic, and you wouldn't be able to stand on anything. And so the compromise there is flow. So the flow of water between these states. So in other words, we see water move from a state of being solid to being gas. So it's just this constant back and forth between nothing happening and every damn thing happening. But in the middle, if you can keep it stable, what you get is flow. You get the river. You get the river of life, the flow of life. And so that's what we're looking at. It's not trying to get to an extreme to the point where it's so peaceful, everything's dead. But at the same time, we don't want everything so chaotic that nothing is able to assemble. And so this is the science of the water element, the flow, the animus, the source interference pattern, if you will. And I'm going to demonstrate how that is embedded very cleverly in these lessons. Like, man, I couldn't have come upon this 7 years ago when I started with this. And then even then I was already kind of advanced and kind of elevated with respect to, cultivating my inner workings and with regards to having compassion and stuff like that or whatever. So I didn't go into it like with the mindset of, okay, this is about to be something where we can hate each other. I can hate white people and be angry all the time, and I could just sit back frustrated and smart as I constantly tell other people about how much I hate devil. No, the devil doesn't get my time like that any more than the rest of humanity, because devil is a mindset at the end of the day. And there are some mathematical, interdimensional, geometrical aspects of that situation that help to support and reinforce the manifestation of said mindset. And so we are essentially going under the hood to see how this vehicle actually runs and then understand how to dismantle it. You got to know how something is made before you can dismantle it. And we have to get beyond the surface of the water to see what's swimming underneath. All right, so let's go ahead and begin because we got a lot to do. All right, so 31st degree. Okay, dokie. 31st degree says to make devil. What must one first do? Answer: to make devil, one must begin grafting from the original. Okay, so grafting from the original, if that's the original right there, you have to start going through that mental process that I was talking about before. And then we'll go on for there. I'll just say ... for now. So you got to go through that process of breeding, and once the babies come about, you can choose one path or the other. We're either going to go to the left or we're going to go to the right. We're either going to choose black baby or brown baby. And eventually you get to a point where that child is susceptible to mutations, and selective breeding allows those mutations to stabilize by continuously bringing together people with a specific recessive trait over a number of generations. So they were doing real live eugenics, and we know eugenics was a big thing in the 1800s and leading up into the 1900s. And so that became like the foundation for a lot of our medical biases in our medical sciences here in the West. And we know that was a large part of the Nazi ideology. So we keep on coming back to the same period of what was going on with World War II and this whole idea of ethnic cleansing and white nationalism and whatever else. It's kind of ironic that the ideas of racial purity and nationalism that you see with the Nazis was largely put in place during the time of the return of the Babylonian Jews to Jerusalem when they followed Ezra back. They had these ideas that they had to maintain, purity of their teachings and their bloodline and whatever else. And so the people who remained in Israel while they were gone, they're not pure anymore because they've been mixing with the people around them. They're just giving everybody the juice. They get letting everybody into the club. So that same mindset leads to Nazi Germany. And then ironically, as soon as World War II ends, for the first time, Israel is no longer a mobile situation. The temple is no longer mobile, meaning that it's a non-physical, orally supported situation where you could be Jewish wherever you at. Now they want you to have a nation state. So they're gonna say, well, we're just gonna, if everybody can't play nicely together, we're just gonna split them up into give them everybody their own room, aka nation state. And so they wanted to stick all the Jews. They had to first define who could be a Jew, who isn't a Jew, and then they wanted to stick them in Israel. Likewise, the Germans didn't have a place until Germany was created, right after, not too long after slavery. So basically, right after the KKK was banned in the U.S., Germany pops up. So didn't have a German nation state before that. They were just a Germanic people. Then 1800s, after slavery is abolished in Britain, the American Colonial Society, a bunch of rich folks that pretty much ran the country, government or not, and they wanted to create the Liberian colony on the west coast of Africa, which they did or whatever, in order to send all of the free blacks or whatever. So the black ethnicity, specifically those people who for hundreds of years were conditioned and adapted to the United States as a result of slavery. So this is a new ethnicity that specifically emerges as a result of slavery. So that is the key distinction between foundational black Americans and what we call general African Americans. Because if your ancestry is African and you live in America, technically you're an African American, which includes people from the Caribbean and African immigrants. And so they've been making a key distinction here, because there's a difference between being among those people who helped build this country versus just looking like the people that built this country. And then it's not that we mind, because we understand that black people, they catch hell all over the planet. We get it. We got it. But then them other folks have a tendency to treat people who are homegrown here a little different from people who've only been here a generation or two. And then people who have only been here a generation or two or just coming also have a tendency to want to try to get in on some of that quote unquote white nationalism, that white identity, as opposed to being categorized with the people who are oppressed here, who have been here, and then are made to feel like they don't belong here. All right, so there is a lot of nuance there. So this is news to you. That's what we're here to do. Okay, let's move on. 32. So 32nd degree. So we've been talking about this 32nd degree for quite some time now, because we keep on talking about, like in the definition for justice in the Supreme Alphabet, we were talking about just ice versus just IC equality. Just ice is penalty. Just IC equality is reward. And we said that penalty has to do with being stuck in or at 32 degrees. And that is not just a temperature. To be stuck at equality gets defined to a greater degree with the question, what are the mental and physical powers of a real devil? It's not a made up devil, a real devil. Powers that are mental and physical of a real devil. So what does this have to do with being stuck in or at 32 degrees, which is to say stuck in or at equality, not able to rise above equality? Answer: the mental power of a devil is nothing in comparison to that of the original man. He only has 6 ounces of brain, while the original man has 7.5 ounces of brain. So 7.5 is 7.5. Okay. There's some science to 7.5 had that has to do with 1 and 2. Okay, so you don't want to lose that significance of this being 1 and 2, but then this equating to power here. Okay, so that equating to power has a significance too. 7 plus 5 also equals 12, so we have something having to do with 12. 7 plus 5 equals 12, but I digress. If it'll help you sleep a little better at night, we'll go ahead and just talk about the 12th degree. Just as a refresher, where it says, why doesn't the devil teach that with regards to, the mystery God situation? It says, because he desires to make slaves out of all he can, so that he can rob them and live in luxury. So something about this differentiation. Now, one thing that should leap out at you immediately is the fact that 12 is emerging with respect to Allah God. So in other words, it seems as if they know something that originates with us. So if I'm talking about they have less brain, but then they ruling something, there's already a discrepancy with respect to how they're ruling, how they live in luxury. They're not keeping their knowledge away from you. They're keeping your knowledge away from you. By you not having access to your history and your information, they can present things to you in a way that makes you think that it was theirs, that it was something that they made up. And because you assume it's something that they made up, you throw the baby out with the bathwater. You don't want to hear about Greek history. You don't want to hear about Roman mythology. You don't want to hear, because you assume that that's something that they made up. No, they haven't had an original idea since they've been on the planet. They received that knowledge. Every single one of their civilizations, they always say that it's some either a God handed them down their information, or an angel gave them their information, or it's always some external source. Whereas if you understand African mythology and that of the diaspora, we always have stories of being self-made. We always have stories that retain the knowledge of how we got from whatever we were before this to where we are now. How we passed from the essence into this plane of existence. And it is recorded to a high scientific degree. It doesn't leave nearly as many holes as outside mythologies tend to. And the more that you understand about the black side of the fence, the more you realize that everybody else's stuff is derivative. So we've got the original equation because we were there to see it, and it's still embedded in our DNA. But the mutations that were necessary to become specialized people that could survive in other parts of the world is a magnetic phase shift. And your brain is closely tied to magnetism, which is why you'll see how that becomes relative here. We've already talked about magnetism with regards to Jacob, and then clearing up the idea of alike versus unalike by understanding Walter Russell's principles regarding magnetism as pressure differential that's trying to reconcile itself and create a balance and equilibrium. Otherwise, you end up canceling out. All right, so the next thing I want you to look at. All right, so if we make this a whole number, since it's a half, we can do so by multiplying both of these by 2, which will give us 12 and 15. A significance when it comes to the number 12, again, So 7 plus 5 born is 12. Well, it's not in that order. We don't born it when we go from 7 to 5. We say all I got adds power. But this is doing the reverse. So it's borning out 12 here by multiplying by 2. Okay, so this relationship is revealing to us that if we think of this in terms of months, so 12 is a solar, 12 months is a solar year. So that's the 12 that we most are aware of. What this is suggesting as 15 is that for every 12-month solar year they have, we have an extra 3 months. An extra 3 months. Which is itself 12 weeks. There's that 12 again. 12 on 12. So for every 12, we've got 12 smaller things going on. That's called fractal. So whereas they're saying there's a flat, just if their brain is doing this, and then I'm not saying this is accurate neuroscience or anything, but we're just saying with regards to the devil mind state at this point, and I'm not confirming or denying that either or whatever, but I'm just saying, just for the purposes of what I'm saying right this moment, if they're operating like a triangle, we have something more like this going on. A fractal, that's Sierpinski's gasket. Okay, so whereas they see the triangle, we see the gasket. So there is a mathematical object in geometry called Sierpinski's tetrahedron. So regular tetrahedron is this guy, is a symbol for fire. It is the simplest, basic 3D geometry. We also call it a triangular pyramid. It has 4 sides. And it is significant in that it is a limit. So we can't have anything 3D until we get here. In past videos, I talked about how that's the gematria for Dalet, Vav, Dalet, which is the root word from which we get David. So the house of David, and it means beloved. Okay, this is a little something to have in the back of your dome. Okay, so that's a regular tetrahedron. Now the Sierpinski's tetrahedron is made up of these things right here. The faces are fractals. So it's basically that same pyramid over and over and over and over, smaller, forever. It is fascinating in the fact that it has a dimension, even though it looks like a 3D object, it only has 2 dimensions because it's fractal. It works such that this thing, when I turn it, like if I turn a regular tetrahedron at a certain angle, like let's say it's like a wireframe, if I turn it at a certain angle, I can actually make that thing look like a square, like this. Like I'm just turning one of those corners up so that I can actually see all 4 corners of the tetrahedron. All right. So in the case of that Sierpinski's tetrahedron, when I do that, when I turn it, whereas I can see, this pattern on it when I'm looking at it straight up, there are exactly 3 angles that I can turn that thing to where this will look like a solid square, like a solid flat square. All right. All the fractals align and they come together to give me the impression that I'm looking at a solid object. So in other words, whereas this is somebody who thinks that the world is solid and made up of solid little balls, European sciences, and this is a fact, this isn't something I'm projecting or making up. The Europeans, despite them taking credit for stuff like Fibonacci sequence after Fibonacci was studying in North Africa, despite them taking credit for, golden ratio in Greece and whatever else, it was already present in Africa. Because in Africa, we had fractal understanding. And it was so well understood that it still persists today, even in the form of subtle things like kente cloth. So you've seen the kente cloth with its yellows and its greens and its red, all in its patterns and whatever else. But the stitching pattern on kente cloth is based on the quote unquote Fibonacci sequence. So even before there was a Fibonacci, you had the clothing, the villages, all of this stuff was based around fractal mathematics because it was the easiest way to well, in nature in general. They learned this from observing natural patterns, but the purpose of it is that it is the most efficient way to organize space. Okay. And if you're a being that's trying to move from one state to another state, and I ain't talking about physical state like Georgia to Florida, I'm talking about from one state of existence to another state of existence, you probably would want to understand fractal technology, how fractals operate, how moving fractally instead of just, this physical presentation, this surface presentation. You would need to know a little bit something about it. So we understood both space and time in a fractal manner that allowed us to move beyond simple 3D and 4D perception, because 3D is how we experience space and 4D is essentially how we experience time. So we don't observe it directly. We just look at the movement of 3D objects, and then we look at cycles, and that's pretty much how we determine time. Now, when we're talking about rising above this is what we all have in common. So that's your equality. Well, the rise above that is to gain 5D plenoptic perception. In other words, understanding the one thing that is informing all the other things. Instead of you trying to chase a million things, you just look at the one thing that is common to all those things. And that is what we will refer to as the projector. So in other words, because of our understanding of the fractal and the ability to look beyond the surface or whatever, our sciences allowed us to more efficiently and effectively identify the source of all things. And naturally, we arrived at the conclusion that we did it. And then we actually understand how we do it. All right. We understood why the black man is God or whatever, as opposed to just, assuming or just being some kind of primitive conclusion. The more advanced you get, the further you go into it, the more you find yourself coming back around to the beginning. But just like a circle, whereas this point that I started, which is 0 degrees, I have to go around the circumference of the object, circumference of the planet, wherever else, in order for that to become 360. Because now I understand equality. My understanding is equal. My mental picture is equal in all things and all aspects of life. Okay? So now I have 360 degrees of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. I done been around. So now I understand the cipher. I understand that the cipher itself was already 360 degrees. I just couldn't see it. All I could see it as was a point. So the point is 360. So if you stand at the point, you have 360 degree vision. That's essentially what you're talking about with 5D perspective. It's to say that as opposed to you looking at things in terms of line of sight, like if I'm standing here I have a line of sight at an object, I can only understand it from this direct point of view, from my line of sight. However, if I'm at the source of this thing, if I'm essentially becoming this thing, I understand everything about this thing because I can see all incoming points of view as a single probabilistic framework. All the advanced computer sciences are based in this exact, all these advanced physics and chemical sciences are pretty much dealing with this because probability fields are where we get electrons. How we understand the position of electrons, probability. Statistics and probability was one of my strongest courses when I was in college because I immediately understood that all they were talking about was cards and dice. And because I'm hood at the end of the day or whatever, I know how to read probability when it comes to a deck of cards. I know how to read probability when it comes to dice. And so because I was able to bridge those two concepts, even when I was in a college setting, I got an A in that class with relatively little effort. And it made me kind of popular with the girls that was in that class. So that's another side effect of, and I didn't have these lessons under my belt during that time or whatever. This is in retrospect, me having got knowledge of self later and then looking back at those moments, realizing that, oh, okay, yeah, so all that is embedded in here. Some of the most important lessons I've had in life or whatever are already embedded in here, but most people, they don't unlock it because they haven't had the experience. They haven't had that 360 degree experience yet. All right, now back to the degree. So that difference between 12 and 15. All right. Now, if we keep going a little further with that, and we multiply by 4 instead, we get 24 and 30. And so if this is a rotation for a year, this is the rotation for a day. Okay, so 24 hours in a day, 12 months in a year. So for this rotation, it's saying that for every 24 hours, I've got an additional 6 days here. I have an additional 6 hours here. All right. So you see how that 12 comes out of this when we multiply by 2, but then we see the 6 come out of here when we multiply by 4. Okay. So this is how they're created. So you know how you have the story of Adam and Eve talking about, made man, and then, then woman came out. So if you look at that as knowledge of wisdom, I take the knowledge out, and then from that knowledge, I derive wisdom from it. Wisdom is the manifestation of knowledge. Okay. The wisdom seed is the manifestation of the knowledge seed. So when you look at that 600-year process that we talk about with Yaku, it's basically saying that it's talking about this process here. Okay, so the wisdom has to manifest from the knowledge. All right, that's what that's communicating. All right, now all of this, what it does, all of that have in common? If I go through 24 hours a day, I have to multiply by 4. I've got 1. This is a 4-to-5 ratio. So we keep on getting this same dynamic of culture versus power. Culture is one's way of life. I, God, I, self, Lord, am master is a culture of freedom. So we got a dynamic of freedom over here. Freedom has a tendency to be related to being free from something. having a free dome, free head. We could just go and come as we please. We do what we want to do. Liberty versus freedom. Because you could be free and dumb as well instead of having a free dome. Now, power is the truth. And truth is the power to resurrect the mentally dead from their present state of awareness. So in other words, freedom without awareness or time without a line of sight, culture without knowledge. You could be free, but you're not aware. You're not aware of the consequences of your power. You're not aware of the consequences of your lack of power. Truth is the power to resurrect the mentally dead from their present state of awareness. You have to switch the awareness state. This is a phase shift. So there's something in the dynamics between this 4 and the 5, the graft and the original, the copy and the master. There's something in that dynamic that is missing. You got to have the knowledge. But what you'll see that this comes down to, the tree of knowledge is essentially these lessons right here. I'm telling you this right now. Because like I said earlier, somebody had access to these lessons, but then they used it, they weaponized it. So they ate from the tree of knowledge, which is our lessons, but they didn't also eat from the tree of life. And that's why their days are limited on this planet. If you don't also understand the tree of life, the central nervous system, how your body is made, if you don't understand, if you don't have both the insight and the eyesight, you can't have just I see equality. You see them both equally because you have the math. You are aligned with the math. Your body is aligned with the math. Your body and your mind are both aligned with the math, so they're able to communicate more efficiently. Geometric resonance allows things to move between dimensions. That's how you got here. That's how you leave here. Is how you get back. It's geometric resonance. Okay, and I as Islam, I self, Lord and Master. So alignment with that. Islam is mathematics. So alignment with the mathematics allows me to see. See is to be equipped with insight and eyesight, or whatever, equally. Okay, this is what we're talking about. You have to reconcile those two. If you don't have both the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, all you have is a cycle of death. So likewise, if we go back to our cosmogram, the Yoa, aka the Dikanga, I have 4 spaces here. If I go around at one time, so I start out here. This is the spark of conception. This is Musoni. I move 1, 2, 3, 4, and I end up where I began. So I'm stuck in a loop. 1, 2, 3, 4. Start over. 1, 2, 3, 4. Start over. It's saying here, instead of just 360, the original man goes in an additional 90 degrees. So that either communicates that we're going 450 degrees, which keeps that 4-5 dynamic coming around again. And then, by the way, 450 it transliterates to D-O, which means God. Okay, but that's just a Latin trick. But Additionally, what that communicates is that we have an additional 90-degree angle somewhere. And that 90-degree angle is the incline. So there's a 90-degree angle that this perpendicular point has with this plane right here. All right. So remember, this decangle cosmogram represents both the movement of the sun through the seasons, and it represents your movement into and out of the physical realm. So this is birth, aka Kala, and then you come here to maturity, and then here's death on this side. When you get to the other side, you're preparing for your next incarnation. This is the spark of conception and then the rebirth, period. All right. Escaping this cycle, which can be done at any time, you can return, come and go as you please, involves understanding what's happening in the middle. So instead of us going around a circle, we want to spiral into the center, which requires us to do some of this action right here. All right, we need some of that action. All right, and then how you get there is through phi. So phi is a logarithmic spiral. It's a special logarithmic spiral. And you'll find that this has to do with magnetism, because that's how magnetic fields operate, just like what I just drew. So because we have the magnetic, quote unquote, we have the ability to move vertically with respect to this 90-degree angle. This is an analog to your spine. So in other words, the ability to make Kundalini rise. So anybody who does because we all have the same internal geometry for the most part, and we have the same arm, leg, arm, head, regardless of whether you black, white, purple, or otherwise. If you focus on that, if you focus on the geometry, the part of you that isn't different, so this is the real path to equality. If you understand the part of us that isn't different, hell, if somebody comes from another planet or another dimension and they're considered quote unquote humanoid, it's because they also too have the arm, leg, arm, head that is necessary in order to do what we're talking about. So it is kind of more productive to think of Allah in terms of humanoid as opposed to just simply human. Doesn't that blow your mind? So if you think of the geometry, we're talking humanoid rather than simply human. All right. So it could be a black humanoid, not just simply a black human on as far as we understand them on Earth is the original man. So just keep that under your belt. All right. So the spine. So of course, we're talking about the spine of Pascal's triangle formed by lines 1 through 8, such that these numbers, so if I go 5 numbers this way, and then I go 5 this way, you're going to see that I get a little tree. So the numbers are building a tree. So when I divided all this stuff up and then I made my little tree of numbers that y'all still think is arbitrary, but I'm telling you, it's the key to all this shit. 1, 4, 4, 1. Like, what are you talking about, man? What you talking about, man? That's why I made the big bucks. I'm just messing with like that Haribo commercial with the gummies. Remember, the kids, they don't even put the kids on the commercial no more. They just have grown folks sounding like kids. That's the 6th line, 7th line. So 1, 8. 8, 1 is the full line. I want you to be able to see the whole thing. 7, 21, 35, 35, 21, 7. All right, so, but the main thing we're looking at is the spine 1, 2, 6, 20, 70, and then it forms a base right here. So it's a 5-on-5 base, so it's the power. The power. What is the power? 1, 2. Let me erase some of this stuff so I can make sure you get this. Make sure you get it. Give you some space. All right, so that's 5 by 5, so 5 is power. So our power, 1, 2, 6, 20, 70. That's Aleph, Bet, Vav, Kaf, Ayin, Iboka. The Fong Bantu word for Iboga. So Google this. Ibogaine is a drug that they use in order to help people kick drug addictions, especially heroin. Heroin was it's the one thing Allah said for us not to touch. You know, because people going to experiment, they're going to have their vices and do what they do. But he said the one thing you don't touch because it mess you up worse than anything else is heroin. All right. And this counteracts heroin. Reason that's important is because we're dealing with the central nervous system. And this mechanism that I'm talking about right here, it turns out that we're kind of a living projector. Whereas the information that is stored in our bodies within the DNA, we have something called magnetic memory. So because of the various magnetic and paramagnetic materials that it takes to make up a human body, and the paramagnetic properties associated specifically with melanin, our body stores a record of both magnetic changes of the full light field of the planet, as well as any damage sustained that causes scarring. So anything that's caused scarring, if it turned out that we had alien ancestors that dropped us off here and then they came back thousands of years later to see how we were treated when we were here, every single scar that people got during slavery would show up in the record. We are a living black box. We are literally a manifestation of the Akashic record. This is what sets the original apart from the other peoples, because we are the full record of humanity on this planet. So you can pick and, you can nitpick and whatever else about the other four families, the yellow man, the red man, the white man, and the brown man. Y'all can nitpick about who is what, blah, blah, blah. But we're the master template. That's not to assert dominance over anybody. It's just to say that the master human template, the matrix almost, if you will, the mold from which everybody else is cut, is based on that original man, that original black man. Okay. And the significance here is that, so if this part of the spine, so this 5 right here, so you're going to see this 4 and 5 dynamic again. So I got 5 here and I got 1, 2, 3, 4. So we again have this 4 and 5 dynamic that I kept on talking about. All right. On the opposite sides of this thing, this 28 plus 56 plus 56 plus 28 is 168, which is the exact number of electrons, protons, or neutrons in ibogaine, the chemical, the active chemical that comes from this plant. So the odds of that appearing within this structure that has always been around are astronomical. It's impossible. There's no reason why this should appear in here. Which is your proof. If you don't have any other proof that this is a designed reality, there it is. Even scarier yet is the concept of self-organization and self-organized criticality. So that's to say that it is a system that organizes itself, and it does so in a stable state that is always on the border of chaos, because it is walking on that razor's edge between order and chaos that allows water to flow in a stream. So because we have things like proportion and constraint, discipline, because we have things like that, we can have a universe that has the chaos it needs in order to create new things. So it isn't just stuck on one thing, but we have a stable path through it. Okay. And so we're talking about the spine. All right. So in order to maintain a balanced, clear flow up the center of the spine is to say that the body is aligned such that you can bring the full resonance of the body up to where you're basically getting a global vibratory impact on the center of the brain. This 168 also happens to be exactly half of 336, which is the number of symmetries in what's called a Klein quartic. Klein quartic is a higher dimensional object, which essentially looks like one of these guys. So it looks almost like a tetrahedron inside of a sphere. And remember what I just said about the tetrahedron. All right, so when a tetrahedron is placed exactly in a sphere, so this is fire inside the earth, this middle point of the tetrahedron aligns directly with the equator. It is bifurcated such that it touches on this part of the globe and this part of the globe. So on both of those, that's going to reach 19,471 degrees on both sides. So that's south latitude. And then if I had another tetrahedron to make me a Merkaba, it would touch in the same exact place up in the north. All right, so these points right here, especially here, these are always the most active volcanic activity on the planet. This is the same place where the eye on Jupiter is located, and where Olympus Mons, the mound, quote unquote, Mount Olympus on Mars. There's a structure there that was created by volcanic activity a long time ago. So it's always right here, and it's because of this. So because of this particular geometry, the way that spheres are made up in the relationship of heat and convection, and that volatile, chaotic energy, because of that, our equator becomes a treasure trove for things like, because this is where that Iboga planet is from. It's from the center of the they keep talking about center of the earth, but what they're really talking about is the equator. But the Ishango bone, the oldest known artifact with advanced math, for the most part. Well, you got the Lubombo bone that's also in Africa, but in terms of being able to demonstrate advanced mathematics, it also has 168 marks on it. So all this is happening Central African equator. This is where the Congo Kingdom is located. All right. They got the technology. This is your Wakanda, I'm telling you. You think it's just fictional, but this is based on true stories. It's what happened with the Congo Kingdom, and the U.S. slipping into this region and taking the naturally occurring uranium from there. That's your vibranium. The Iboga plant is your heart-shaped herb. The Ekpe Society, the Leopard Society of Africa, they literally dress up like leopards to enforce order and peace in the area. So the whole Black Panther thing is not just something that they sat down and made up. The original Black Panther comic came out right after Allah revealed the lessons, the supreme mathematics. So in the 1930s, they had the 120 lessons, but they did not have the supreme alphabet and the supreme mathematics necessary to properly decode it. That is the importance of what I'm talking about here. So naturally, 1947, 1947 is literally where these bombs and the rockets and all of that is coming together. So we've written this on the very mathematics of this reality. We made the simulation. This is why we have the sciences to understand how to run it. But we just lost the knowledge of ourselves in the wilderness here. Okay. And so, and so this spiral that you see coming around the spine right here is actually showing you this line right here. So if I do a line like this through this one, through this one, through this 1, that's 2, through this 1, 2, that's 3, 1, 3, 1 is 5, 1, 4, 3, 1 gives me 8. It's the Fibonacci sequence. Okay? It's the Fibonacci sequence. So it's already inherent in our sciences because we understood fractal mathematics. So that ain't something Fibonacci just came up with in 13th century or whenever it was, or whatever. He studied in North Africa because we already knew this stuff. This may be your first time hearing it, but our ancestors knew this stuff. And so through these geometrical coherences, we've always understood how to bridge our 3D spatial experience to the 4D photoptic or light experience. So if you look at 3D as being associated with sound and vibration, then you look at 4D as being associated with light, phonons. 5D is the point, the projector from which both of these qualities emerge. So when you separate the two into audible sound, audible light, that's what's happening. And so this is Akasha. So the point that is neutral to everything is Akasha, which can mean space, atmosphere, spirit, all of it. All right. So it's not something that is above you or beyond you. It is permeating everything and therefore within you as well. You are a living crystallization of the Akasha. So you are the time, you are the space, you are the geometry. All of that is contained within you and that is supported. If you are a Christian or otherwise up on your studies, 1 Corinthians 12. Melos, members. He is not talking about the members of a church. Well, not in the literal sense. The church is the body of Christ, right? And Christ is a logos. Logos means word. The fractalization of word. Logarithm comes from logos and arithmos. That is word rooted in math. It is the logarithm by which we derive our speech. It is how we translate math into speech. We call that thinking. We call that awareness. But what he's talking about is that your design is such that you have the entire macrocosm within your body. You are every spirit at once. So what's happening when you are able to vibrate the entire spine, it unites the 33 vertebrae into the occurrence of one. And it is within that oneness. Remember, 33 is the age that Jesus was when he was crucified. By becoming one, it allows you to observe reality from the central point. And in your case, your entire reality is programmed in your DNA. So, and then because we're all connected back to the original man, this allows you to get the whole story. And because everybody has the same central nervous system for the most part. Now we've got different stuff going on with our projector, especially if you have the D or E lineage haplogroups on your daddy's side, because your daddy's side is what is dealing with your y-axis of your body. Okay. So it's tied to your mental and how you perceive and how you filter reality. If your reality is being filtered totally in terms of survival, the way people who did not get ALU insertion had it, so that YAP plus ALU insertion that gave us 300 additional base pairs. Everybody else got their perception based on mixing with Neanderthal and Denisovan and all of that. It's only us, the Negritos in South India, some Tibetans, and the indigenous Japanese that have this. So those who didn't have it, they had to get it from somewhere else. Remember in the last lesson at the end, in degree 30, we were talking about the 600 years the germ became white. Remember, I also said that time, so the 25,000 year cycle corresponds to the circumference. So that means we have a juncture between time, distance, so space-time, but then we also had genes. So I told you we had about the same number of genes as this. So the circumference of the planet, the 25,000 year cycle, and our number of genes are all vectors of the same type of information. So you basically record space-time probabilistic information in genes. It's not something you have to do manually. That's just how it works. Genes capture more than just simple evolution information. It also includes environmental information. Every bit of line that shined on you, every bit of magnetism that every bit of electromagnetism that this planet has exerted upon you is recorded in your genes. And therefore, there are sciences right now in anthropology and in archaeology where they're starting to be able to use like magnetic materials and different things found in within artifacts of fossils rather, that allowed them to recreate what the magnetic sphere was like around Earth at that time or whatever. And then by modeling how those changes happen over time, you can start to kind of see a picture of why things were changing globally at a given time. If you apply this to a probabilistic field, a probability field, that means that when we're looking into the future through something like divination or whatever it may be, or it be out-of-body experiences or whatever else, what we're actually doing is we're entering a simulation that allows us to engage with the same set of probabilities that were happening within a particular time period in order to see what will most likely happen if I do A, B, C, or D. So it's the equivalent of saying, let's see, what's a movie all of y'all recognize really, really, really well? Let's see. Let's say Lion King, just to have some example. So Lion King forward and back, every song, every step, every beat. Well, imagine if, let's say we change something like Mufasa didn't die. So we've basically got everything up to Mufasa's death to work with, but now we're changing the probable future after that. So based on the way things turned out without Mufasa's presence, and based on everything that happened leading up to that scene, we would be able to reconstruct the conditions of that entire reality. If we look at the movie from start to end as a closed reality that we can't change, because it's a film, it's written in stone. If we look at that as the world of that thing, if we change a factor like whether or not Mufasa dies, we can keep everything before that moment the same, but then we can kind of speculate on what would most probabilistically happen, what would most probably happen if you change that one factor, and now you've got a new story. So just imagine that that's how we're operating. Imagine that's how human beings operate. We say, okay, when I finish the first Homo sapien, I have a closed story. The entire story of humanity begins and ends with this guy, because if he dies, there is no humanity after this. Does that make sense? So this is why we always go back to the original man. He's the origin point. And so if you start from the origin point, you can look at the rest of human history as probabilistic, as opposed to it only being stuck in this linear, static kind of form. Okay? And so there can only be one original. There can only be one origin. And it's not to debate as to what the baseline of his form was. We have the evidence with regards to that. And so because of factors of geometrical resonance, like attracts like, the more similar you are to the original man on the planet, the more likely you are to repeat certain probabilistic characteristics. And if you are able to manipulate your nervous system, whether it be chemically, or if you learn the actual techniques that allow you to do this manually, that's what taking control, that's what it really means, I, self, Lord, and Master. Yogic control or tantric control over your own body. Then you are able to activate by balancing the hemispheres of the brain through entrainment, by getting that spine to resonate, and then create entrainment between the two hemispheres of the brains by stimulating the pineal and the rest of the third eye axis. You're able to bring your awareness into those electrical signals as opposed to the external electrical signals. Your melanin has a lot of the same receptors as your eyes with respect to sight. The same receptors that your types of cells and chemicals that allow you to see with your eyes is contained in your melanin. So in other words, you don't have surface melanin, you can't see. I mean, you can see with your physical eyes, but in terms of having an omnidirectional full body eyeball, this is why we don't say the all-seeing eye. We say the all-eye seeing, because it's like being covered in billions of eyes and then them coming together as one picture. And so that information comes together through the connection of peripheral nerves and lattice geometry that stimulates and informs the central nervous system. And so all of that information is contained and stored in the brain. This is why I'm spending so much time on this 32nd degree, because you have to understand what's really happening with the brain, what's really happening with the central nervous system and our connection to plasma, which is lightning, electricity, and so on and so forth. Fire, most importantly. So when we talk about fire as an element, it deals with will, so free will. So we're understanding how to wield our free will. So all those stories about Indra and the Vajra weapon or whatever made from a spine. Whenever we're talking about Zeus and his thunderbolt and all that stuff, this is what we're really talking about. Remember that connection back to Mount Olympus, the base of the tetrahedron. All of that. That's how we kept up with this information through the geometry, the mathematical relationship. So we be able to reconstruct time when we look at information, when we look at the Bible, the Torah, the Vedas, the Quran. We able to reconstruct the history based on the math that's contained in it and comparing it against the math that's in our body. Our body is the key. If you know how to align your body such that certain sound resonates in certain places, that's how you know you've got the right alignment mathematically. And then once you understand those relationships, your brain, your subconscious is automatically able to put those things together. I can sit and vibrate my body chanting Om and then realize that the position I'm sitting in is similar to a tetrahedron because I have pattern recognition, because I've been properly initiated and trained. Right. So if you haven't been properly initiated, you don't have the mental framework to recognize the stuff. So it's just arbitrary. You're just sitting around chanting, or you're just doing some superstition shit. So it's not that any of that stuff is wrong or bad or whatever else. It's just that you were taught it wrong or you weren't taught at all. So getting rid of the devil already, you can see that it's more a matter of getting yourself out of a state of unawareness. All right. I'm just getting started. So let me move on. Okay, so we talked about the brain. So we're dealing with there's something going on between the path from culture to power. Something happening in the transition from culture to power, that 4 to 5. All right. The next line, it says, so let me say the whole thing. So the mental power of a devil is nothing in comparison to that of the original man. He only has 6 ounces of brain, while the original man has 7.5 ounces of brain. The devil is weak-boned and weak because he is grafted from the original man. The devil's physical power is 1/3 less than that of the original man. Therefore, his mental and physical power is much less than that of the original man. All right, so it makes it sound like it's just talking about some I'm better than you, dominant type of whatever else. And then if you fall into that trap and you only stop right there, the devil's already got you. All right, so let's look at what this is really telling you. All right, so let me first start by let's look at the word weak real quick. Because the word, so the direction left or subtle, soft, all of that stuff deals with weak. So you have an electric weak force. A nuclear weak force, and you also have a nuclear strong force. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what's the difference between those two. All right, so the word weak actually comes from to bend or to wind around something. And then there's an element of to sift, separate, and I believe I just saw something about overcome as well. So separation is associated with weakness. To be pliable, to wind. And you see it there, so it's talking about to overcome. So that's going to be important shortly. So let's associate weak bone with to overcome. Or we can put soft. And let's put flexible as well. All right. So this sounds a lot like clay. It sounds a lot like water. It's somebody that can be easily molded, shaped, changed. Easily changed. We're making that clay soft so we can change it. It isn't hardened. Geometrically speaking, hard and sharp is associated with the tetrahedron because that is will. And that is associated with the navel, the solar plexus. So you hear that sun in there, solar plexus, which is also associated with the ego at times. So that's why you have to get it under control. On the opposite end of that, the icosahedron. So I'm gonna draw one of those like. So it's like a fractal. It's like a Star David inside a Star David fractal. All right, so that has to do with water. So that has to do with the animus, the animating principle. And animation is essentially to make a sequence of events. So it's to align things into a sequence. All right. And that has to do with the third eye. So this is why the mind, specifically the third eye. So let's separate the brain from the mind. The actual physical mechanism of the brain between the thalamus and how it interacts with the hippocampus it determines which information is going to be filtered. Okay, and so you can totally miss things that are happening in your environment because your thalamus is basically set to filter certain stuff out. So the idea is we want to get to a state where we're able to get the entire information and be able to access more of it. That's what we're talking about with the Holy Boca and whatever else. So this is information that you're always privy to, but then your brain prioritizes which stuff you need and don't need, and then it gets rid of a lot of it when it's transferring information from short-term memory to long-term memory or whatever. So all of these mystical experiences and whatever else, there is no separation between the physical and spiritual world. It's just that we have perceptual filters that are built in so that we can have a stable experience of it. And then what we call the stable experience is the useful land. So useful land, the land that you can stand on. So unuseful land simply means the land that you cannot will. So no matter how much the other man wants to, like he could claim all the useful physical land on the planet because he's got the dynamite, he's got the nuclear warheads. But there are aspects of this reality that he cannot own, that he cannot observe because he cannot organize it. This is the science of the Krishna and so the Krishna, better yet. So you got the Krishna Yajurveda and the Shukla Yajurveda. So yeah, so he can take advantage of the part that he can actually understand clearly. But because we've got this full body suit that is essentially a giant eyeball that can see in all directions at once and gain omnidirectional information that gets stored in our DNA, in our heritage, we are able to use vibration in order to reconstruct the reality that is written in the markings on our body. And I'm almost positive the mother folks were aware of this because that's what allowed Alan Turing to essentially become the father of modern computing, because he understood the correlation between reaction diffusion in the markings on animal skin. He understood the bridge between that and recursive models. So your AIs that you use for Google and Gemini and all that good stuff, those are called LLMs. They're language models at the end of the day. And so the early foundations for artificial intelligence were associated with that period with Alan Turing, and that's why it's still called the Turing test to this day. Is how convincing a machine has to be in order for a human to not be able to distinguish it from another human, whatever. So yes, your mind state could easily be a form of analog artificial intelligence, which is to say that once you understand machines at an advanced level, and this is found in the Hindu Vedas, the concept is called yantra. Yantra. So you probably heard of mantra, the sound, but then the sound is the physical outward manifestation of yantra, which is a tool. And so that's exactly what it means. It means tool. All right. And so these are unmanifest, and they are mandalas. They are shapes. They are specific geometric relationships that when you apply a sound, like one of these stable sounds, to either water or to sand, stuff that is soft. So remember this weak. When you apply it to those things, it displays the shape associated with that sound, and specific sounds produce specific shapes. All right. Matter of fact, I kind of want you to see that. I talk about it all the time, but I really, really want you, if you've never seen cymatic patterns. This when they send sound through something and then it makes these shapes. Okay, so different sounds produce different shapes, and so yeah, it looks like that Hindu stuff or that Buddha stuff. All it is sound, and different shapes within your body, including your DNA, when it is cut horizontally. Let's see if I can get a cross section. See, cross section of DNA. In fact, I want specifically B DNA, so that's the most common type of DNA you have. You'll see that it forms these patterns that very much resemble those cymatic patterns I was just talking about. So your DNA is basically like one cymatic pattern that's being copied and spun at a specific rate. So it's the rate of turning and the ratio of your DNA structure that simulates movement in a frozen geometric pattern. Therefore, if you're able to manipulate your nervous system in the right way, because of something called scale invariance, meaning the golden ratio is the same no matter whether you're talking about a galaxy or you're talking about the spiral inside of your DNA. If you understand the geometry associated with that, you can figure out which sound is associated with that geometry and then use it to map fourth dimension. Whereas we cannot perceive visually fourth dimensional or higher objects, it is possible to use sound to, like, you can make a four-dimensional sound. You can make any dimension of sound. It's like you might not understand it when you hear it because it's not like what we normally use to communicate in 3D. But the math of that is present because of how the sound is operated. So you can reduce that math into an equation or, set of principles or whatever else. And then you can use the math itself if you understand the relationships in the math, like what I've been teaching you with the supreme mathematics and some of the more advanced mathematical and physics concepts I've been teaching you. If you do so, you can look at a set of numbers and you can basically understand the environment that it is describing, which is exactly what happens in the Matrix movie. So when Neo, he starts to be able to read the numbers as an environment and as people walking in that environment or whatever else, that's what they were trying to depict for you. It's this right here. Okay. I say all that to say, so this 4 to 5 thing is reinforced, and just to show you it's not just something I'm making up. This thing says the devil's physical power is 1/3 less than that of the original man. He said power, which is 5, is less, so minus 1/3. 5 minus 1/3 is 4 2/3, or 4.66 repeating. That number right there is the smoking gun of the level of advanced mathematics that is happening within this system, because that is an approximation of 4.6692 so on so forth, which is known as the Feigenbaum constant, which is at the dead center of something you've heard of but probably don't fully understand, which is chaos theory. Chaos theory says that no matter how complicated something may look, it always originates typically from a ordered system or a specific mathematic ratio, or like it's something in that principle. Now, when you look at, let's see if I can get your exposure to that particular concept has likely been through the butterfly effect, not just the Ashton Kutcher movie, but the idea, they say that a butterfly can flap its wings in one hemisphere, and then it can cause a chain of events that results in a hurricane on the opposite hemisphere. And because there were so many chaotic events that happened between point A and point B, you might not even make the correlation between them. So many different steps happen between us emerging and the white man emerging. If we look at those as the two extremes, because nothing came after the white man. It's like these are the two extremes. So you got the first man who's the black man, and then the final man, which was the white man. So many different steps happen between those things that if the white people were isolated and had never seen other people outside of themselves, they would assume that they were first. They're naked in terms of experience. And because they've arrived at a physical conclusion to their development that resembles ours, at least in terms of arm, leg, arm, head, they concluded that they were first and that they made us instead of the other way around. So they had knowledge without the wisdom. They had the stories. We gave them the stories. But they assumed the stories was talking only about them. That creation only happened when they came about. And so it took those discoveries that happened after 1947. So, and around that time, so you had the non-commodity libraries that were discovered around that time. And then you had the Shango bone and all of that in the 1950s. And then by the 1960s, that's when they started discovering the oldest known human remains in parts of Africa. So after all these years where they were telling us that they came first in Europe, and then somebody got cursed, and then black people were made, and blah, blah, blah. We flipped all that shit on its back, and then we were able to finally pass the Civil Rights Act because the science no longer supported their racist agenda. They're doing their damnedest to try to reverse it, and then try to get everything to operate on other than stable mathematics. But that's neither here nor there, because we've got the math on our side, and I'll show you how. Especially in this conversation on how to defeat devil. So that right there is already your scientific and your mathematical proof of it, but it gets even better than that. Instead of you having to try to argue this in the white man's court where reason does not rule out, let's look at the other ways that this math is supporting this. So I wanted you to see real quick the chaos theory. Let me see if they'll show me the right chart that I want. Chaos theory. Okay, well, there's a butterfly effect, so you see that's why they call it that. So over time, it starts to look something like that in 2D. But that's not the one I want. I want the table, the chart. I want the... Let's see, how can I do this? Let me put in a chart. Let me see what comes up. There it is. I want you to see this thing. Okay, so you see this kind of branching thing that looks just like our nerves? That already showed. So that's generated by this just mathematical principle, how the things separate up to a certain point. So whenever you see branching things like trees or your nervous system is basically following that model right there. What happens is it keeps on splitting, but only up to a threshold. It's only so far that it can split. So I have one trunk, and then it splits into two branches. Then each of those two branches splits into two, and then it just keeps on branching like this. It's only so far that it can do that before it collapses and it gets stuck. In a sense, this is similar to the behavior of light, such that the closer an object with mass approaches the speed of light, the slower and slower it seems to become because of something called time dilation. To the point where it looks like that object's not moving at all, because it takes an infinite amount of energy to move it past that point. So it becomes stuck. It becomes frozen. So you keep seeing this thing with regard to being frozen. So because all of our sciences are associated with drumming and sound and the ability to map dimensions beyond this, we're not limited by light speed and the limitations associated with light. Does that make sense? So we don't have to rely only on what is seen with the eyes, because we understand how to map environments with sound. Not necessarily like dolphins and bats do it, because they get a direct visual of it, but it's the same underlying. Every creature on this planet started from a single cell organism. It was one cell. To this day, when you're born from one cell that multiplies into multi. So it's not that far-fetched a concept. But because we all have the same underlying cellular technology, there are abilities that may have manifested in a certain way with the bat and the dolphin that don't resemble the way it developed with us, but we all have that same type of principle, but we just apply it in the form of being able to send sound and thus phonons, which are lattice vibrations, through our own body. Okay. And then there's a threshold here. So the same math that informs why you can keep on splitting people and make them lighter and lighter until a specific mutation happens, and then it stabilizes as the white man, is embedded in chaos theory. So what this is telling you is that this tail right here, that's between the 4 and the 5, the culture and the power, this is the factor that is determining who has the power at a given time. Because we have something called power laws. Not laws that somebody made up and wrote down. I'm talking about actual laws of physics called power laws, and they're associated with that self-organizing criticality that I mentioned earlier. It works such that the more that, so let's talk about it in terms of wealth, since that's what y'all like to talk about. Some of y'all don't understand nothing unless I put it in terms of money. If all the wealth ends up only in one section of the population, what it does is it creates this near infinite tail down here of about the level where most people's income is. So you got only a handful of people whose income is here, and then you've got this near infinite tail as it approaches zero, that is the average wealth that's among it. All right, so in critical systems, this is a pressure buildup. So whenever you see pressure like this in a pool of water, so water normally is at equilibrium in a tank. So whenever water gets pulled to one side, that pressure is just building until this finally tips over and it's a tsunami. So that's how a wave is created. Okay. That's because the reason that happens is the energy over here can be looked at as infinite. Like we're at the speed of light. And when you can't do anything, you don't move. And when you don't move, that spine is aligned. You're in meditative mode. So if you're not dead, but you're not moving, you're essentially in a state of meditation. So in other words, remember that thing I drew a little while ago with the base and the spine? You're essentially bridging those two conditions such that you're able to take advantage of alignment with that quote unquote unuseful land, if you will, because it's infinite. So it's an infinite amount of energy. This is essentially the trick behind 0 point energy here. People have died for talking about lists, but I like to see y'all motherfuckers run down on this right here. There's people in high positions that preserve the knowledge of self like this, and this is why I seem lucky, but it's because I'm aligned with the knowledge of God. All right, so anyways, this right here When it's properly aligned and sound is sent through it, you're essentially mapping the entire universe at once. You can't perceive all of that all at one time. It's too much for us. We have to sift what knowledge we can out of it, and then continue to build on it. But this is how these sages and these Dibya and Babalawo and yogis and whoever else, they're not sitting around trying to come up with stuff to trick you. These are original people who understand the science, this advanced math and these advanced sciences, to understand how information really works in the vacuum. It is accessible because you are essentially a microcosm of the design of the universe. So if you stop looking outside yourself and you get still enough, your brain stops looking for information outside of you, and it instead starts to resonate with the ratios inside your own body. It doesn't need the spatial or light information because it has the environmental information. Your environmental information is identical to all that's happened up until this point. It's recorded in your system or whatever. So essentially what's happening when you're dreaming is something like that. But then if you're able to preserve your awareness through a controlled out of body experience, it's not just you watching a playback of a movie. It's you starring in a movie that's being filmed in real time, where you're saying, well, what if I made this decision, or what if I made that decision? That's essentially what's happening in the out of body experience. All right. And so for whatever reason, this 32nd degree wants you to understand that. Understanding the power of going within, having knowledge of self, having both insight and eyesight, and all of us having the same awareness of this. Because it accumulates. If we're here in this tale where you got the 1% with all the wealth here, we're called the poor righteous teachers because we are in a position to be able to tip the scales simply by changing the knowledge. The only reason that the 10% is able to control the 85% is because the 85% don't know better. And so the 10% is able to initiate conditions in the economy and everything else that uses a graph like that. Really, it doesn't even have to just be water. Literally, the financial graph, the way the economy works is based on these same principles. It's based on the golden ratio, and the golden ratio is essential to this concept of self-organized criticality. All right. Now, embedded within these numbers. So remember, I tell, chaos theory is essentially the power to build or destroy, which is 8. So on either side of that base that we were talking about earlier, on either side of that base, where I had the numbers for so we had 70 in the middle. It was flanked on both sides by this 56 and 28. And 28 has a lot of significance when it comes to Lorentz too, with chaos theory. Oh, look, that's a threshold. All right. The threshold before you can build or destroy. He without the knowledge of self can neither build nor destroy, but takes many lives. Why? Because this right here, this section right here, so 8 plus 28 plus 56 equals 92. So that's 92 and this was 92. What's significant about 92? That is the atomic number of uranium. It is the largest occurring chemical element on the planet Earth and in the known universe as far as we know. Everything else you got to synthesize. But as far as naturally occurring elements, uranium is the biggest. The equator where the Boca plant grows is uranium rich, which I just said earlier. Uranium is what the U.S. took from Central Africa in order to make that atomic bomb. Okay. In case you didn't notice, 92 appears right here. Significance of 66. 66 is the abjad value in Arabic for Allah. So we've got culture, Allah, and uranium. I self Lord and Master, I God, Allah, and uranium. So there's some kind of relationship between this limit to the physical world, 66, Allah. Okay. Now let me show you something real quick. All right, so first off, 66 is 60 and 6, which is the letter sin, and wa in Arabic. That spells siwa. That's an alternative spelling for Shiva. This was a Bantu word meaning the exact same thing as it does in Sanskrit. It's a Bantu word that is used to mean auspicious, kind, good. And the Rig Veda, the first ever part of the Vedas, from like 1700 BC around in there, it still used Shiva, Siwa in that same way as an epithet associated with kind and auspicious. This was well over a millennium before it was used as a proper name for a single being. Proto-Bantu, because this shows up, because there's Siwa, or a variance of it, Shiwa, Siwa. There's even a Bantu tribe called Shiwa. And they live like right with the Fong, so the Fong absorbed a lot of the Shiva. So the Fong are tied to Shiva. Okay. And Shiva is the supreme being. So Shiva is just another word for Allah, in this case, supreme being. All right. And so, because that word root already existed in Proto-Bantu at least centuries before, it was used in the Rig Vedas, the logical conclusion is that these are teachings that originated with Bantu people. Okay. And so, and then we talked about how that's put. So the people of the West were put. And then we had people who moved from, the north into Central Africa and South Africa. And then they came out from Central Africa and then spread up the Nile again. And then some went to the west and so on and so forth. So there was this circulation that was happening through the continent. All right. So this is Shiva. So Allah is Shiva. Same shit. So you are Shiva. And then they tell you explicitly, Jiva, or the life force, is the supreme. Jiva is Shiva is the exact same statement as the black man is God. But we also recognize that we're not the only ones that have arm, leg, arm, head, because we gave it to everybody. Everybody's our children. The child of Shiva, well, he has two of them. There's Ganesha and then there's Kartikeya, aka Skanda. And then he's known as the Lord of Earth. The other person that you hear referred to as the Lord of Earth a lot of times is Satan. All right. It's Satan. So devil. So they're literally telling you, if God is the black man, and devil is his creation, devil is his child, they're saying the same thing that the 5% Nation and the Nation of Islam are saying. These were never meant to be something outside yourself. It is something you did to yourself. It took some conscious and extended effort in order to separate ourselves such that devil could emerge. So that doesn't mean beat yourself up because you made the person that is oppressing you right now. It's just understand what your true power is. It's not in the physicality. It doesn't have anything to do with just those weapons and stuff they have, because they just happen to be on, they put themselves in a corner where our collective efforts are able to easily tip them, because we have the very resonance of the universe itself on our side, if we all understand this stuff the same way. Okay, now the other jewel about that 4.669 is that if I add 1, 3, 3, 1 to it, that equals equality. So 6. And then I would need 1.5 more. So remember that 15 from earlier. Because remember, 7.5 times 2 is 15. So we're doing that once. So knowledge and power. Well, in the definition for power in the supreme alphabet, our 16th letter, it says, knowing that knowledge is power, therefore equality is power. So if power is the truth, and truth is the power to resurrect the mentally dead from their present state of awareness, and equality is to be equal in all things, in all aspects of life, what we're saying is that your power is that your awareness is your power is in being aware of all things at once. That is what the Holy Spirit represents. It just means the full Akashic record, having access to the full record. If you know the one thing that contains all things, you can't be lied to. This is the higher sciences of what we're talking about here. All right. Now, that 32 is also important before I move on to 33. Because Oppenheimer, when he said, I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, after they tested their atomic bomb, he was quoting the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11, verse 32. What happens when you don't rise above 32 degrees? What happens when you don't read what happens in the 33rd? What happens if you don't truly understand what's going on in the 33rd? Notice it's 33 right here. What happens? All right, so the question in the 33rd degree is ultimately, we said the mental powers of a real devil. Now the question is, what is a real devil? What distinguishes a real devil from the fake one? The made up boogeyman. It's like you have a mystery God, there's a mystery devil. So what is a real devil? It says, any man which is made weak and wicked, or any live grafted germ from the original, is a devil. So it does not say only white man. It says any man which is made weak. Remember overthrown? Or what do we say? So overthrown and overcome. So defeated. So if you assume a attitude of defeat, that too is wickedness, because you're God at the end of the day. Or any live grafted germ from the original. So any copy that is not significantly representative of the original. If you make a copy with the intention of replacing the original, when you lie about your origins, all you do is hurt yourself. If you lie about your origins because you're not aware that you're lying, because you don't have awareness, you're doing the wisdom before you did the knowledge. Taking you back to that 21st degree, where Jacob had his ideas. And so remember, Jacob is Jacob. We've associated Jacob with this 33, which transliterates to that CC, which is pronounced sh or ch in the Terafit language, meaning both to usurp and to be hairy, which is the meaning behind the names of Jacob and Esau. Now, in Bhagavad Gita, in that 33rd degree, it says something to the effect of defeating one's enemy in order to have a hold on, let me break it up. Was it righteous kingdom or a peaceful? It's like I have a peaceful kingdom sort of situation. They try to change it to mean something like rulership, but it's kingdom. Let's see. So Bhagavad, there it is. Let's look at this. All right, so they often translate this to. All right, so stuff about obtaining, gain, conquering enemies, enjoy kingdom, and then they break it down as therefore arise, gain glory, and after conquering your enemies, enjoy a prosperous kingdom. They are already put to death by my arrangement, and you, Arjuna is the other way it's written there, who can shoot arrows with his left hand, can be but an instrument in the fight. Okay. Arjuna, you who can shoot arrows with your left hand. Okay. So a couple of things I want to point out there. So the word that they're using for enemies actually means overthrower. They're generalizing, but it actually means overthrower, which is the same as usurper. So they're actually talking about Jacob, aka Yakub. Okay, so defeating Yakub. So Yakub was an original man with an idea. So you don't need to defeat the devil. You need to defeat the mistranslation of what was being observed. All right. Now it also says who can shoot arrows with the left hand. So the left hand always represents spirituality in African spirituality. The right hand is your ikanga, which is your power, your talents to act upon the destiny that was assigned to you. Okay, now when it comes to this 1331, this comes from the symmetry break of the cube represented by line 3 of Pascal's triangle. So if this 3-3 is both Esau and Jacob, a symmetry break means that one of you is going to be Esau, one of you is going to be Jacob. I can go this way or I can go that way. Now in this case, we're able to born. So 1 + 3 + 3 = 7. So knowledge, understanding. That allows us to born out to 7, a la God. In this case, this is understanding, add knowledge. Or to make the 33-1, to align the spine. All right. Those who aren't already God by birth have the option to also connect with the knowledge of self through the learning and through the yoga. That's why it was designed. We had the Iboka because our bodies already work like that. We developed within that stuff. We developed within that uranium. We are that. So people who hadn't been in that environment, people who had been away from that environment for the longest, they had to develop other ways to be able to assess this direct interface with one's ancestors. So they had to go through a stringent process of training with us in order to make sure that their minds were, cleared and aligned with the proper geometrical understanding, among other things. And then once that happened, then we gave them the techniques in order to resonate the spine, access the pineal, be able to project and see the truth. So everybody's able to do out of body experience now. But this is essentially your yoga. So we got the iboga and the yoga. Iboga and yoga. This means to yoke. So iboga, yoke, and evoke. To invoke God. All right. So anyways, so Arjuna, we the one to the left who already had the iboga. All right. But we've got this option as well. So if I apply, so I got 4, 6, 6 here, and then I apply my 1, 3, 3 to it. That's how I end up with equality. My better yet, 9 and my. Well, let's look at that without it. So we don't even have a tail on here to add to it. So this just comes 9, 9, 9, 5 for the left. On the other side, if I do 4.669, and then I do the 3, 3, 1, 0, 0, 0, boom. So the power. All right, so we got the power, but he's missing this right here. Now, 99 just happens to be the sum of that Iboka spine. So 20, 70. So that 1, 2, 6, 20, 70 actually adds up to 99. There are 99 names of Allah. So not only was this the abjad for Allah, now we got the 99 names of Allah. Okay, and then 9 is the born, is to manifest from mental to physical. So manifesting the names of Allah from mental to physical is the power of the truth. Truth is the power to resurrect the mentally dead from the present state of awareness. So they got the power, but they don't have the ability to manifest the names from mental to physical. And that 90 and 9, just like we had Shiva, which was the 66, 90 and 9, this is the, so Sa and Ta, heavy Ta. All right, so let's see what that means. All right, so we were talking about defeating Jacob, enjoy the kingdom. In other words, if Jacob is related to the 33, the internal, whoever was looking at the 32 where it said, I am become death, that word kala, which means death right there, in the Congo, that same word has to do with time, but it means birth. Because when they're talking about death, they're talking about the fact that the second that you're born, now you're subjected to linear time, and therefore you are destined to die. So what Krishna was actually communicating was that he has already won, because those enemies, whether they die now or they die later, they still have to die. So the victory is already mine, is what he's saying. But of course, because them devils was young, they had the knowledge but didn't do the wisdom. They thought it meant I have to go dominate everybody I don't like, and I gotta make an atomic bomb, and instead of us being able to be civilized and live in peace, now we gotta maintain peace by keeping people in fear because of the bombs. This is what we're talking about, rising above equality, y'all. That's what we're talking about there. Okay, now what did I say that I wanted to look at real quick? Yeah, so we want to look at that root. So sa, so let's see, sa, ta, Arabic root meaning. Let's make sure they give us the right ta. Let's see, so we got something to do with leaping and attacking, but let's make sure they got the right ta that we want. Is it? I'm gonna put that should be heavy ta. That should be heavy ta. Okay, ta is heavy than the root is ta, rather than the light ta in Arabic. Ta is mufakam, a full mouth letter. Okay, this is the most common root using a heavy. So satar is the most common, meaning to write or draw lines. Ruler, a tool used to draw straight lines. So this is exactly, let's see. So in other words, so hold on. So in other words, let's get a summary. So what exactly does the biconsonantal sa ta root mean with heavy ta? Just so we can have clarity before we move forward. So this idea of spreading, extending, dominating over a surface. So it has nothing to do with dominating people. It's a measure associated with thickness, stability, veiling or hiding, the spreading of something over a surface. In other words, just like I told you that hell and cell come from the same Proto-Indo-European root, and because they're Proto-Indo-European and not Bantu, they totally messed this up. But that means to cover, conceal, or to save. So both the hell and the cell, when we're talking about the Christos, which is the oil or the lipids, this right here is telling you the formula for how that first ever cell was made. How it keeps certain things in and all of that, but it allows things to come in and out. It forms a barrier that can let things in and out. It's a gate. Just like how you have gates in computing that determine which information goes where, which electricity goes where. We have a cell membrane. This right here was the first essential creation that allowed all other cellular life to exist. So this concept right here is what we all have in common. The ability to move in and out of this. If you look at this like a planet, if you look at the cell like a planet and the planet like a cell, this is how you pass through the atmosphere. Now, we're not going to get into this until we get to the speed of sound and all of that stuff in the actual facts and whatnot. But a esoteric secret that's associated with Freemasonry is that the significance of this 33 is that 33 times the speed of sound is what they say is necessary in order to escape Earth's atmosphere. So like if you're trying to create a rocket that can leave the planet, they say 33 times the speed of sound is where it happens. And I'm neither confirming or denying, but that's what we're talking about. So this idea of spreading as opposed to dominating, a measurement of a spread, that's distribution. So the fourth letter, dalet, in Hebrew is dal, And so this is a spread, distribute, pour, and then this is judge, which is what Elohim means. So the spreading of the Elohim, the spreading of the judge. Judge, accuse. That's what Satan actually means, is accuser. But, or the shaitan, and it was a job. Before it was made into something that was evil and whatever else, it was just a job. You report back to God. Devil, on the other hand, is the false accuser, the slanderer. So the problem ain't reporting to God, it's reporting lies to it. So we talked about the devil telling lies. All that's saying is, unless you have the proper geometric arrangement for the information in your body, in your mind, when you get new information, you may interpret it wrong. So this real devil is the result of misinterpretation. Remember I said weak had to do with being malleable. So malleable interpretation, as opposed to them having the stable interpretation of something, they have one that is extremely changeable. You need a blend between the two. You need both stability. You need just enough stability to where it's not chaos, but you don't need so much stability to where it becomes rigid and unusable, which is what has happened with a lot of religion. It needs to be like water. And that's why Christ is called the living water. Okay? And he's able to walk on, he's like that oil that walks on top of the water. For us to be able to experience the depth of the water, we have to be like a rock. And that's why Peter's name is. If Peter doesn't pay attention to the surface, to the oil, and why the oil floats on the surface, that's the Christos, which is basically the translator, it's the barrier to entry. If he doesn't pay attention to that, he sinks. Okay? Whereas a stone or rock sinks, ice does not sink because of its internal structure, which is based around this right here. Every water molecule has a relationship like this with everything else, but we said it has to do with fire. So the fire within the ice is its structure. That's the same thing that makes a diamond clear. Is that structure right there. And we said that has to do with will. Okay, so if Peter wanted to float, he has to will it. He has to have the will to do so. And so this is part of the mechanism that allows us to have free will. You know, that's what gets us in most of our trouble. But understanding discipline and structure is what allows us to turn our free will into creativity. And then that's what the Logos, the Christ, was here to inform us of. Okay, so we've been at this pretty long here, so I'm going to go ahead and knock out these last few. But then that was the most important clarification that needed to be made when it comes to these lessons, because if you can build from there, then you're in good shape. Okay, but I also wanted to mention that spreading is the meaning of prastara in Sanskrit, and Pascal's triangle is also known as meruprastara, which is an organizing principle between heavy versus light. We were just talking about that with the ta, and so heavy ta, heavy is guru, that's associated with dark, black, and gravity. Okay, that's why we need the heavy ta, so you know the distribution. And what are we talking about? The distribution of darkness, the distribution of melanin. The Krishna Yajurveda, the Krishna, Christ, Karash, Karesh, Kailash. All of these words from various languages pointed at the same place. All right, 34. They ask, can you reform, devil? Can you reform, devil? It says, no, all the prophets have tried to reform him, devil, but were unable to. So they agreed that it could not be done unless they grafted him back to the original, which would take 600 years. So instead of losing time, they decided to take him off our planet. He who only numbers 1 to every 11 original man. Understanding God multiplied by understanding. Love, understanding, peace. You got to understand God. You got to understand the image of God. The icos, or icon rather. That's the template. So the image of God means the template of God. The word idol also means image. So that's been taken out of context. That doesn't mean you become idolatrous. The only thing that idolatry really means is you're looking at a separate image, as opposed to recognizing that the oneness of God is found in all things. So that one thing itself is not the only representation of God. But the most important place where you can see God is within yourself. So you shouldn't be looking for an external image because you're the only image that you can fully understand. It's like, because you could feel what's going on inside of you. You understand what's going on with your body because you feel it, and can't nobody feel it for you. So that's the only image that's the only clear image you can get associated with God. And that's where the concept of the chi comes in Odinala. So your personal spark of divinity, which projects your personality onto the surface of you. Remember, we were talking about the spreading out of the surface. That's your akaraka, which is your destiny. The markings that you have on your body. It's a readout of your destiny being projected from the center of your essence and your being. Your heart, if you will, but not just your physical heart, but the essence of your core existence. It's where the observer is. And it's 5D plenoptics. So you are projecting this whole reality. We all project a similar reality and are able to interact with each other, but essentially we're all just a part of each other's dreams. We all have the same starting information. So yeah, we each see the same people. Like if I'm looking at that door, you're going to see that door too. Or whatever. That's just because we all started out from the same starting point. But at the end of the day, I can only see reality from my perspective. All right. So it says the only way would be to graft the copy back to the original, which means going through and tracing the steps back through etymology and other ways in order to reverse entropy. But more importantly, I told you 600 years is referring to genetics. So this is 300 base pairs times 2 of the allel's insertion. In the beginning of this series, I told you where Shindo Hozumi was saying how in order to establish peace, they would go around and they would have these dinners or ceremonies where they would basically mix bloodlines. So they would marry off each other's children. So my son marries your daughter and so on and so forth. And we have kids together. Now we one big family. This was the giving of those who did not have the YAP plus, the gift of the YAP plus, aka our universal flag. Several elements about the description of the universal flag, which is the sun, moon, and star. Sun, moon, star. Several elements of that suggest that it is referring to our skin, our color. So by mixing with them, giving them our melanin, we also give them access to being able to, some of the things I've discussed in this conversation. We give them the same filter, reality filter. So whereas their thalamus may filter out certain information, thanks to our allo insertion genes or whatever, our thalamus is stabilized such that we can bring clarity to things. We can see clearly. All right. So when we talk about purity, we're not talking about racial purity of we all got to be the same. We're talking about we all need clarity, because then we'll naturally see the same thing. Okay. So that's a genetic choice. Now the other thing it says here, so instead of losing time, they decided to take him off our planet, he who only numbers 1 to every 11. So we already talked about what 111 is. That's the Aleph. And you've seen what I've done with the letter A. That is a hand, so that's Yod. That's the spine. That's Vav. And that's the other Yod. So that equals 26. Gematria for Yahweh. And it is the proportions of this, and this. So we gave them our proportions so they could see clearly. The Neanderthal had a stockier, shorter build, and therefore their hands did not operate the way ours did. They did not have the dexterity that we had. Their bones were different than ours. We just talked about the difference between the devil's bones. There were all these different qualities that the people outside of this environment did not have. And so by mixing, by coming together, and the civilized ones, we intermarried, intermixed. You end up with people dark and light, from the blackest of black to the yellowest of yellow, from Nigeria to Japan, who end up with these D or E haplogroups on their daddy side. So this is passed through the daddy side. That's why the black man is God. It doesn't make him better than woman, because she still has Allah, arm, leg, arm, head. But there's a certain type of clarity that we are afforded simply because we inherited that. That's it. That's the only reason for that. But again, through the techniques that I told you, 33 plus 1, this is what we're talking about. Ain't that what 34 is? But the 33, add knowledge. You can't, quote unquote, reform devil, but you can graft him back, is what that says. Okay. I know I'm going like mad long with this, but it's necessary. I'm erasing stuff that can't be recovered because I don't have a black marker. I gotta go buy some black markers. One of these days when my daughter is in therapy and I got a little break, I'll go get me a new pack of markers. All black. All right. 35. 35th degree. What is the exact expiration of the devil's civilization? And I'll go ahead and write that down. 1914. So we already talked about that. That is the end of the German Empire, beginning of World War I. So because they had veered so far off track, the World War was a consequence of how long they've been off track. And it wasn't a smooth transition. It could have been a smooth transition. They didn't want to give up the power. I personally suspect that something similar happened with World War II, whereas they were out of control, so we had no real choice but to allow them people to use the power of the sun for external means in order to do, the atomic bomb and whatnot. But instead of them, all right, we got peace, we're going to disarm everything, which is what they originally planned. Now, mind you, there was a plan to get rid of all nukes on the planet after this. But instead, the military industrial complex, they continued with that nonsense, and people kept their nuclear programs going. There had to be some new regulations and stuff that were put in place, but they could have destroyed. Like Oppenheimer knew there was a very real possibility that the reaction that he had to use in order to make that bomb successful, it could have ignited our atmosphere and we would have ended up like Mars. That's basically what they say happened on Mars. We were living on Mars, living good, fucked up the atmosphere, and it was over. You know, that's neither here nor there, but then them folks were definitely very, very interested in Mars, particularly Werner von Braun, the former Nazi who helped start NASA's rocket programs and all of that. Okay, so there's definitely some entanglement right there with 19 and 14. And then remember, matter of fact, it was something else with that. So the 14th Surah, if I'm not mistaken, Surah 14 should be Ibrahim. Yep, that's what I thought. All right, so that's also, so whenever we see that 19, because it's dealing with that 19 code of the Quran, you usually want to see what that is. Let me multiply that too. Let me see what that is. So that's going to be 266. Okay, so the wisdom of Allah, the manifestation of the knowledge of Allah, is associated with Surah 14, which is all about Abraham. So the one who had the realization of the oneness of God. So that's the other thing that ends devil civilization. So their recognition of the oneness of God is what that's also communicating. So from a geopolitical standpoint, it brought us into World War I. But if you're looking within, is the realization of the oneness, the one thing that is found in all things, the oneness of Allah. Arm, leg, arm, head. The universal flag, sun, moon, and star. You wear that. Okay, 36. It says, what are the exact number of years, months, and days of the devil being birthed on our planet? So the other thing I wanted to bring your attention to with regards to planet is that the meaning of the word planet is wanderer. All right, and then so they say, so in the degrees it says sun, moon, and stars, they are planets, and the planet is something that is made or that is from or made from the beginning, the origin, something that's made from the origin. That 5D. So wanderers, as I've talked about in the past, is what they call people who they're ascended masters who, instead of moving on to their next density level of expansion in these cosmos, they decide to come back. And so they say Jesus was a high level 4D wanderer who's on his way to 5D. So we get that same 4, 6, 6, 9, 2, 5 dynamic. He decides to come to Earth instead. He had the love associated with high level 4th density polarity, but he didn't have that 5D wisdom when it comes to life, which is to say that he sacrificed himself as the ultimate form of love, but he left people without clarity. So when we say take the devil off of our planet, it's to take it off of our wanderer. Take the devil understanding off of our understanding of Christ. And what it is. So the description that I've been given, the one I've been giving you this whole time. So the devil, so this slandering, so the lie that was told on him, that's in that other degree where it talks about why we took Jerusalem. In that 11th degree earlier. How they misused Christianity. So to take the devil off of Christ is to take it off of Christianity. take this mindset, take this lie off of what Christianity is. Because all Christianity is African spirituality. The Bantus were contemporary to this. The tribe of Christ is the tribe of Shabazz. Shabazz, Sheba, Shava. The tribe of the seven. Allah God. Okay. So 36. So what is the exact years, months, days? So a year has to do with the sun. We just mentioned sun, moon, and star. So we know years because of the sun. We know months because of the moon. And then we know days because of the stars. So when the stars come out, the day ends. So this is associated with 6 and 20. 26, Yahweh. It's also associated with the cube and arm, leg, arm, head. The pentagram. The sun is a star, but it's the only one that we see during the day. All right. 6 degree, remember that it had to do with the 6 sextillion tons, the weight of the earth, which put us to 21, which was asking us about the founder and the magnetic and all of that good stuff. Well, we didn't get into how old was the founder, but then 21 tells us about who the founder is in the first place. And we dealt with that yesterday. Okay. So Cube, Yakub, don't you forget that Yakub was also an original man. It was just his determined idea. He had to bring about this chaos in order for us to understand what really makes us God. Months. So we got 72, 241. So we already talked about 72. So you divide 360 by 5, that's 72. So this is God's wisdom. God's whiz, his moon is his whiz. 24, that's her X chromosome. And 1 is the knowledge. So the woman with the knowledge, we call her queen. The substance. The word queen comes from Gwen, which in Tibetan actually deals with black. And really a black substance, to be honest. So it's literally talking about melanin. So we got arm, leg, arm, head, plus black melanin that we got from the woman. So the Y chromosome, the X chromosome. Okay, and then those two come together to make the child, who's associated with 2,197,351 days. Okay, so we have enough to work with a 2nd degree, a 19th degree, 7th degree, understanding power degree, and a knowledge degree. So these two things come together in order to manifest this right here. So the wisdom degree, we found out about the genes / circumference. So the difference between the X and the Y, the lineage between them is 104, which was Yada, which is the source of the word Jew. So the child. So when Yahweh, the man, Allah, and the queen. So this is the same story as the Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. So that's a metaphor for this right here. Solomon means, so soul is moon. Sol is sun, Mon is moon, Solomon, sun and moon. And the Sheba is 7. There's 7 days in a week. Sheba is 7. 7 days. There's 168 hours in 7 days. So that gives us Iboga and the Shango Bone. And 1/2 decline quartic. All that's embedded. All this math is embedded here. 19th degree was the duty of a civilized person. Oh, was that? Yeah, this is the degree. Well, it's what happens. It's the if a civilized person does not perform his duty, what must be done? All right. So severe punishment. And that came up somewhere recently too. That was pretty profound, but I won't get to. But then severe punishment is severe austerity. So remember peace. We had peace, joy, and it's saying that if you're not doing your duty of civilizing, which is teaching civilization, it's going to be harder to establish this peace. The yoga that brings the dark and light together is going to be harder because everybody want to be separate with each other. It's hard for us to give you the black substance because you got laws against interracial marriage, or you so racist that you don't want to have nothing to do with them other folks. Jews don't want nobody to be anything but one thing. They don't want to acknowledge the black Jews. I literally had Limba DNA. But I digress. 7th degree. This is also profound because remember that 1/3 degree that set that whole thing off. The 7th degree was at how fast does I plan to travel, which gave us that 1,037 and 1/3. So we keep having that same 1/3. So just like we had that chaos theory earlier, we had that. Now we can look at this as either 1st and 37, but it's more likely the 10th and the 37th degree. 10th degree deals with the mystery God. As who is that mystery God? There is no mystery God. We spent trillions of years of searching, couldn't find him. We concluded it. So the God who is the Son of Man, we concluded it doesn't exist. There was no other outside God. And that's the understanding of God. So remember, understanding God times 3 is 111. And I already explained the science behind that, how that leads back to here. But we still need to get to our 37th degree, which is the next one. So if it's pointing at that 137, we'll deal with that in a minute. We're going to skip over the 35th that we just did. Which dealt with 1914. Okay, so that year, the end of the devil civilization was what that dealt with. So we want to figure out what 37 has to do with that. End of the devil civilization. What ideas around it. 19, the severe punishment. The harsh yoga. 2, the circumference, the genes. It's hard to mix them genes. All right, got all there. All right, and then of course 1 is who made the Quran in the first place. So that was what first taught us about this relationship between the circumference and the circumference of the earth, and then the distance, the years, the cycle, all that in the first place. All right, so just keep all that in mind. Let's see what 37 tells us. It's almost 1 o'clock. Y'all got me in here for 3 whole hours. But we want to go ahead and wrap this up so we can go on to the next lesson. 37, it says, what does the devil teach the 85%? that God is a righteous yet unseen being existing everywhere? Answer: Allah is God in the earth and the heavens above. He is just and true, and there is no unrighteousness in him. But he is not unseen, for he is seen and heard everywhere. He is the all-eye-seeing. So we've already talked about that, the 360 degrees of sight, because the same principle that allows your eyes to see is found in your melanin. And your melanin, the precursors for it are found in what's called interstellar medium. So that is the dust of space from which stars and everything else is born. Your melanin is made of the same stuff. You're literally covered in stardust. That carbon is how we make diamonds. Whenever a diamond lattice takes this shape, it becomes clear and it becomes that tetrahedron, becomes a diamond. When it's flat and sheets like that, it's like coal. It's black. We can make this look like this by turning it a particular angle. So it all comes down to an angle. Angle of sight. If you're looking at everything from the center of everything, which is 5D, you see it from all angles. Allah shows the truth, and he shows and proves the truth regardless of the angle. Regardless of the angle. Because it's two ways to make 360. You can either do it with a square, or you could do it with a circle. Either way, that's 360 degrees. All right. Bang, boom, bang. All right, 38. Let's go ahead and move on to that. I feel like building on that what the unuseful land looks like. Matter of fact, I'll do it after this. Because 38 is, well, then why, let me go ahead and write that. Then why, so all of this trouble, why did God make devil? Why would we do this? If y'all can be original man, why would we do this? It didn't say why did Yaka make devil. It said why did God make devil? Because he was still an original man. This was predetermined. It was predetermined by the 23 scientists before his birth. It's in our autosomes. We already had this charge to do this. Answer: to show forth and prove his powers, that he is all wise and righteous, and that he could make a devil which is weak and wicked, and give him the power to rule the earth for 6,000 years, then destroy him in one day without falling a victim to the devil's civilization. Otherwise, to show and prove that Allah is God, always has been, always will be. Single day. So at the beginning of this cycle was year one. So the first day of year one. So we said that was about 13,000 BCE. This is the same exact date. They say that Adiyogi, aka Shiva, he was a Shivata who raised to the level of the Supreme. As far as they were concerned, he was Shiva. He was a god. Shiva's always drawn as a black dude. All right. Same time that this first year happens, in our lessons, he taught them folks the knowledge of self. He taught them yoga. He showed up to Kailash, which means crystal. And it's also known as Meru, which we said was Pascal's triangle. And then we said that in order to crystallize, you need that tetrahedral arrangement, which has 4 points, 6 lines, and 4 sides. That is the exact numbers in the middle of line 4 of Pascal's triangle, meaning we have a breaking symmetry, so we're getting rid of this one-to-one symmetry, which allows us to have this. Remember, I told you that is the firepower or the will that is in the planet that aligns that equator with the fire belt. What makes rain, hail, snow, and earthquakes? We make the earthquakes. So by reactions that we could trigger near the equator, because there's a naturally occurring uranium reactor up here, we're able to affect tectonics on these latitude lines and be able to affect them people wherever. So if we wanted to take you out, if we wanted to flood the earth, we could. So yeah, so there was nothing mystical that was necessary about that. We flooded the earth. So this 13,000 years, we're coming out of this ice age period, the Younger Dryas, as they will, and then that's where the flood narrative of Noah is tied to close to that. All right. So yeah, we are that guy. We are that Anunnaki that they have in them stories. Keep messing with it if you want to. It said then destroyer. So who's the destroyer? Shiva is called the destroyer. But he's also the resurrector, because he's only getting stuff out of the way so that the new can come into being. He ain't just recklessly destroying stuff. Build or destroy. You gotta get... See, because he without the knowledge of self can neither build nor destroy. But the fact that he can destroy shows that he has the ability to build as well. Alright. And so all these different words for God and these different definitions, if you go back to the oldest, to the origin point, is one. And so by him teaching that yoga, if this is the effect it has on the planet, and we said that your body takes this shape when you're in yogic meditation posture, the 6,000 years associated with the devil's rule and the 13,000 associated with the start of this cycle, that 613 is Vav and Mem, or Om. So that's how you resonate your body, the way that this tectonics, remember Jesus, his occupation, they say it carpenter, but the Greek word is tectone, which is where we get tectonics. So the tectonic plates of the planet or whatever. Don't worry about trying to rumble this body. Rumble your own body. You've got what you need in order to rumble and resonate your own body. That 6 and 13 relationship is the fruit of life. So in other words, you have the ability to simulate the effects of Iboga because of how your body is designed. It changed our whole chemical makeup. You see how it has these 6 points? That's 6, and this is 13 stars. 13 orbs. Each one of these orbs in the fruit of life. Oops, I did that wrong. Each one of these orbs has 6 point, has a little 6-point star inside of it. So each one of those has one of those inside of it. So that 6 that you see on the outside is also on the inside. 6 and 6, Allah or Shiva. And that 13 is the water, the interference pattern. So this is derived from the flower of life pattern. This is the fruit. Okay, and that is holographic. So this is the shape that snowflakes take. It's definitely dealing with water molecules and how they organize into pattern structures, how holograms work. So yes, we were talking about that 5D plenoptic point of view. That's what it looks like. All right, and so what that's communicating is that the information that's contained in the whole structure is contained in each of the individual structures. When I shine light through droplets of water in a cloud or whatever, each one of those little droplets has the same image forming inside of it, and they just combine it into one that can only be seen from your angle. So your cloud of reality contains the same 7 colors as everybody else's reality. And when the sun shines through that, we see the rainbow. We see it divided into 7 forms. And then when the sun shines off of the moon, the stars also out. Stars are able to shine. So you have a universal flag built right into you. That's how we prove we God, because we match all the math. That's 6 and that 13. 6 plus 13 equals that 19. So that's our 19 code. Self or Savior. All right, so you'll say, are you going to look at the hell or you going to look at the cell? The cell, or you going to look at it as a hell? This is associated with Metatron's cube. Metatron in some tellings has been associated with Enoch. So the initiate and other tellings, they try to make Metatron out to be an archon or something that has you trapped here. You only trapped here because you don't have the knowledge of self. So the same Savior that lets you out is the one that's keeping you in, but depending on what angle you're looking at him, the serpent is either going to look like the cause of the fall, or it's going to be the catalyst for the rise. So the serpent of the Garden of Eden, or the brazen serpent to which Jesus compares himself to, is talking about the way that the Dogon and Egyptian mystery schools recognize serpent to represent word or membrane. What's the password to get in? Word, membrane, the vibration that actually oscillates your body so that you know you and that vibration are one and the same. It's Om. Om is Krishna. That's the christening. That's the anointing. If your body resonates with Om, you are of the tribe of Christ. And this is something that can be taught. I assume it works the same with everybody else because, I just followed the instructions that Sadhguru gave, and I was able to do it, and I was able to see the stuff, and I was able to vibrate my visual range and take advantage of the parallax that allows me to see the information. And I saw that shape, and that's how I discovered it, and I started researching it. And I was like, oh, that's a real thing. And I kept on going, and I kept on going. That's how I'm able to get this out of the lessons. All right, 39. Tell us, do you hope to live to see the day that the gods take the devil into hell? Remember hell, cell. Take the devil into cell, the hell into the cell. Tell us, do you hope to live to see the day that the gods take the devil into hell in the very near future? Answer, yes, I fast and pray, Allah, that I live to see the hereafter, when Allah in his own good time takes the devil off our planet. So if you fast and pray, so this is focused intention, combined with ritual recitation, which means making the same sounds or focusing the intention in the same direction, focusing your awareness in a particular direction. Fasting is the physical, so this is the mental aspect plus vibratory. This is a physical state. So when you fast, it lowers inhibition. So you're not as picky about what information you receive. And it resets the state of the cells. So cells. So take it in the hell. So we're digging into the cells. And it destroys unneeded materials. So the point of fasting, it ain't just to be some religious stuff. It's because it actually removes trash from within the cells. it's hard for the cells to resonate. It's hard for you to get that water resonance if the cells are full of garbage. And so, fasting, when done correctly, it activates what's called autophagia, which is when something eats itself. And so it's not destroying the cells, just eating the excess trash and stuff that's in the cells that sometimes have trouble moving out. And so it starts to clarify and cleanse the brain when you do this correctly. And stay hydrated and, just do it correctly. And that's how you take the devil off your planet. You take the falsehood off of it. So, yeah, so it's basically giving you the instructions of how to get your body right, get your vibration right, get your resonance right, get your posture right, all this stuff so you can access the library that's embedded in you. And last but not least, and this 1 to 40, before I get out of here, I'm coming up on almost exactly 3 hours here. The last degree, we're moving on to the 1 to the 36 next time. I said I would talk about the unuseful land, but I'll come back to it if I have time. All right. 40. What will be your rewards in regards to destruction of the devil? Remember, reward is just I see equality, aligned with the mathematics of Islam, such that I know that I, self, Lord, and Master, I will have insight and eyesight that is equal. So what I see outside of myself will be the same as what I see inside of myself. I'm breaking down the barrier. By using mathematics, I will break down the perceptual barrier that prevents me from being able to see that everything outside of myself is a manifestation of the same ratios and rates that are occurring within myself. That's your reward. The answer, the official answer, peace and happiness. I will give all that I have and all within my power to live to see this day for which I have waited for 379 years. So there's that 379 again. 3 plus 79 equals 19. Understanding God born. So understanding how God manifests from mental to physical. Born to knowledge born. So I got to know how to manifest from mental to physical. Born to knowledge, add a cipher. So I have to know how to add a being, add a person, a place, a cycle. That's through experience. And then that borns back to knowledge. To know, look, listen, observe. So the point of observation. It all comes back to the point of observation, which is the 5D plane optic projector, which is you as the observer. Okay. 3rd degree, 7th degree, we got the speed. 9th degree, we're introducing the concept of the mystery God. 3rd degree, we were talking about, let's see, so you had the circumference and you had the diameter. 7926. There's your 7. There's your 9. 26 was Yahweh. Talking about the diameter of the earth. Remember, pi is the relationship between the diameter and the circumference of the earth. If we put this in here, remember it cuts that into 72 degrees on each one of those. We got a full mathematical plate. Now, then I want to get into the stuff about the radius. 450, so 463. I need to get into that right now. Not really. Okay, so that's all what's really so aligned. So by the time we reach the 40th degree, we got all that math to be able to see it within ourselves and around ourselves. Did anything I wanted to add about that? I mean, I could. 300 is Shin, which is fire, or it's the divine spark within us. 70 is Ayin. I, that is the I, or source. 9 is tet, which is complete. Equals Kim, which also means black. Black source of the spark. Black or complete. The Shango bone, the last line, or the rightmost line, has that, so complete or black. And then Kes, which means bone. Cognate the Kashi and the Hausa, so it also means plot of a story. So the full story of black is contained in the original man, and this was written 20 to 25,000 years ago. So they got you. They got you. They made sure that we had the tools. All right, so real quick, the science behind the land that you can't use. They tell us that the total land on Earth, so the power of God, 255 million. They tell you that we got 29 million of useful land. That leaves 28, 255. I told you the significance of that 28. In addition to being associated with Yaka's birth control laws, which separated one from the other, so it caused separation, which is to make a binary. 255 is the total of lines 0 through 7 of Pascal's triangle, and that is the minimum number, that's the exact number of lines that you need in order to be able to make Sierpinski's gasket or Sierpinski's triangle by removing the even numbers from that. So when we talk about removing the black babies, we're talking about removing even numbers. So black is even, white is odd. In this case, we're talking about binary. 0, 0, 0 is Aku, and Alpha, which is stillness and stability. And then the opposite of that is Obi, which is movement and dialogue. So this is the difference between 0 and 15. Halfway between 0 and 15 it should be 7. Am I doing that right? No, 7 + 7 is 14, so 15, so 15. So 15, so 1, 2, I'm tripping, I'm hungry. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So divided by 2, so 7.5 is half of that. All right, so half 15 is 7.5, but we do have 0. So that's a total of 16. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is why we have a superposition between 7 and 8, which both happen to be 15. And remember, so half of 15 is 7.5. That's the ounces of brain of the original man. So in other words, this juxtaposition between 7 and 8. So in order for me to make 7 in binary, I need to have a 1, a 1, and a 1, because that's worth 1, 2, and 4, and then a 0. And then in order to make 8, I just need 0, 0, 0, and a 1. All right, so I'm breaking them two apart. Okay. So that's 7. That's 8, and that's a code. And then, just out of curiosity, because I hate to leave that up in the air before we get out of here. Let's see, alpha 16, alpha seeds, so we can see what this means in binary, so y'all can see this ain't just some mumbo jumbo. Is actually binary computing done in a manual form. So they lied to you about what African divination was, but this is exactly what was taught around 6000 BC. This is what they based their Bible and everything else on. So we got, so on would be, so we would have white, black. So that's Ejite. And let's see, off, on, which is black, white, Okala. Ejite means, it means the main road, the natural wave. The path signifies the main road, representing a major path or route usually used in divination to indicate significant life direction. So that's the main path. And then Okala means something wide, something that's fought over, a stride. Okala describes something wide or spread out. Remember, we were just talking about that spread with Sata. All right, the 99 names. It can indicate breadth or expansiveness. So we've got a specific path and spreading out that we talked about, which was distribution, Prastara. So we were talking about Meru Prastara. Remember that spread had to do with Sata, which we derived from the 99 names of Allah, which is the total of the spine of Meru Prastara, aka Pascal's triangle. They gave us Iboka. So in other words, we made the plant digital. We understood the math embedded in it to the point we no longer had to be bound to a specific location. So the 1 to 40 ends by saying this lesson number 2, which contains 40 questions, was given by our prophet W.D. Fard, answered by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, one of the lost and found in the wilderness of North America, February 20th, 1934. Okay, I know curiosity kills the cat. I gotta know what Surah 34 is whenever I see that 19. So Surah 34 summary. So Surah 34 is Saba. So yep. So some bands. So Saba, Sheba. Shiva means 7. That's what we got, Shiva. So we the supreme now, y'all. All right, and it says focus on monotheism, the inevitability of the hereafter, and gratitude for divine blessings. It contrasts the gratefulness of prophets David and Solomon with the ingratitude of people of Sheba who lost their prosperity, reinforcing that blessings require gratitude and belief brings true success. So this is how we ended up lost in the first place, according to this. The surah asserts Allah's omniscience, stating that nothing, not even an atom's weight, escapes his knowledge in heaven or earth, validating the day of judgment. David and Solomon, that is the sun and moon, and David was the star inside the earth. So the Merkaba / the tetrahedra, they are depicted as using their immense power and blessings for the worship of Allah. People of Sheba, a community blessed with fertile gardens, Garden of Eden, who became ungrateful and turned away, leading to their destruction by a flood. I just talked about the flood. Did I not just talk about the flood? The Shiva people. He showed up because he was one of the people that remained. He who remained, Shisha. Changing their paradise into a wasteland of bitter fruit. Bitter fruit. The iboga plant is extremely bitter. This is talking about it right here. Addresses deniers who believe that the day of judgment will not come, assuring them that it is inevitable. It argues that only Allah is the true provider and that idols or immediate powers or intermediate powers cannot benefit humanity. So you got to go straight to the source. You got the spark within you, so you can go straight to the source. It emphasizes that Prophet Muhammad is a messenger to all humanity and that wealth and children do not bring one closer to Allah. Only faith and righteous actions do. All right, so you just got to do the action. And there's no more righteous action than understanding how you and the Creator are one. You're just at different points in time. So because of this temporal experience, you can't see the connection between the beginning and the end. But if you can figure it out, if you can figure out how you and the other man sprung forth from the same origin, then all that's left at the end of the day is arm, leg, arm, head. The surah concludes by asserting that truth has come, where falsehood cannot generate anything lasting, warning the disbelievers of the final accountability. On that note, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.